Hello. Our guest today is Matt Landman. He is a documentary filmmaker and an activist. His website is actualactivists.com, where he has a ton of content related to GMOs, vaccines, geoengineering, 5G, all that kind of stuff. He's a wealth of information and a super passionate dude, and we hope you enjoy this podcast as much as we did.
The future is a concept. It doesn't exist. As the proverb says, tomorrow never comes. There is no such thing as tomorrow. There never will be, because time is always now.
Welcome to the Philosophical Minds Podcast, the podcast about the stuff we wonder about, and other things.
Arguing with the SEC, and so he asked me if I would sit in on this, and I'm really interested in it because we've had some things that have happened with us, and on the legal side, it's really interesting for me. So he's going to be basically kind of leading the questions, but I'll be taking notes, and I might chime in if you're okay with that.
Cool. Perfect. Great. And then remind me your names, and then we can get going.
So, Skylar and Ashley.
Ashley Bryan.
Skylar and Ashley.
So, yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
I'm really excited to talk to you. Appreciate you coming and talking to us. I guess let's jump into it. So what kind of started you getting interested in this subject and all the 5G, the geoengineering, what kind of gave you this passion?
Well, for me, I lived a pretty normal life. I was a pretty normal guy. And let's see, I grew up in Virginia. I ended up moving to California to hopefully go to film school. I ended up finally going to film school in Northern California, got an MBA, graduated top of my class with an MBA, worked in the business world again and hated it, and ended up working for a nonprofit and then hated it. And finally, I worked on an organic farm in Northern California in this rural, very isolated part of the world, amongst these couple thousand-year-old redwood trees near the coast of Northern California. And there I woke up to weather modification. We were in the midst of a 4-year drought, and is getting on the edge of being pretty catastrophic for a lot of farmers. So I was witnessing that firsthand. And firstly, I learned about my indoctrination and my upbringing really quick on the farm because I knew nothing about anything. I didn't even know potatoes grew potatoes. Literally, I'd been around potatoes and they'd grown those eyes, but I didn't know that potatoes grew potatoes. It's unreal. And I'd gotten an MBA and I'd gone through a pretty rigorous upbringing education-wise, and I didn't know anything. I was disconnected to both the ground and the air and all those natural things that we should be all tuned into. So I was connected to farming and to the ground and to the sky and dependent on the weather. If we have a crazy drought, the crops die. And this one specific occurrence, this specific day, we were expecting a downpour, and Farmer Paul comes out. He's been on Doppler radar. We're expecting 100% chance of rain. And I can see this giant storm system coming in off of the coast because I can literally hear the waves crashing on the farm that I work. And as this black storm cloud rolled in, massive storm, to alleviate this drought, all of these planes showed up. It was the irregular pattern of appearance of the planes. And not only did all these planes show up, whereas there was very sparse air traffic on any given day, but all of the planes were zigzagging the sky, leaving these persistent linear cirrus cloud formations out of the back of the jets. So I did really good in my statistics class, really well in stats. I mean, I killed it. I was number one in my MBA in the stats because I'm pretty good at numbers and being visual and what have you. And everything's a numbers game, right? So if there's all of this air traffic all of a sudden, and they're leaving lines out of the back, and they're on the edge of the storm, whereas they weren't there before, and then the storm didn't drop any rain, right? And so I kind of just planted that seed in my head. I still had nothing to reference. I had no clue. But later on, a couple months later, I was talking to a friend back east because I'm from DC area. And we were talking about the kids nowadays and 9/11, and 9/11's an inside job in case anybody doesn't know. And we got to discussing chemtrails, and he brought it up, just random conversation on the phone, which is really important because your voice can really do so much. Just planting that seed, you can really lead people to that truth. So either way, once I finally woke up to it and I learned that nobody knew anything about it, I started getting involved, and little did I know, it was my destiny. I was on this like crash course to waking up to a whole lot of things. I went to try to make this movie on it because I wasn't happy with what the movies that existed on chemtrails. I wasn't happy with any of those. So I said, I'll make a better movie, and that'll be the role that I play. And I moved up to, I'm almost done. This is my life though.
Yeah, go for it.
I moved up to British Columbia outside of Vancouver, Canada, where I went to first make the movie. And then I moved up there again to edit and finish the film. And I'm in this quaint, serene, like beautiful island community, Roberts Creek on the Sunshine Coast of British Columbia. And I thought I was going to get all my act together, you know, and make this film and get into the activism because I was pretty new at it. And little did I know, 3 feet from where I slept was a smart meter. So I became electrosensitive. I'm only like slightly now, like if I'm around a lot of EMF or cell tower or whatever, I get heart palpitations or even chest pains, heartache. But I got really bad off. I thought I was under some sort of, I was telling my friends I must be under attack, you know, electro harassment, because I couldn't sleep. It was really intense being that close to a smart meter that much time of the day. You know, because I was just in my room editing and then sleeping in my bed right in there next to it. So I learned about that. And then as I got involved on the chemtrail space, I started hosting these conferences because I wanted to bring people together to film them. I didn't realize I was really spearheading this movement and bringing some energy to the movement that was much needed. And I moved to Arizona because of the normalization launch of chemtrails, of geoengineering as a solution to climate change or global warming.
That was going to be one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because I think I heard about that in one of your interviews, and you were talking about, I think he was from Tucson, one of the guys that's kind of pushing it, and I was going to ask you more about that because I hadn't heard about that, and I was just curious if you could elaborate.
So I can elaborate on that. So ultimately I moved to Arizona for this third annual global conference that I was to host to bring light to the normalization and launch and the official launch through the media of chemtrails, okay, or solar radiation management, to spray our skies with chemicals to dim the sun to save us from the supposed heating, which is actually a hoax. So I moved down there for this conference, and that's where I started really learning about frequency and 5G, because I saw all the towers in the Phoenix and Tucson area. And then I learned that the state of Arizona was going to be the first to go statewide with 5G. So I learned of what's 5G and all this, and I started going to town hall meetings because I was living in this really small town, Sedona, Arizona, and we had maybe 2 cell towers. And on the front page, it was written that we were to get 27 new towers along with hundreds of small cell towers. And so I went to the town hall to speak and just to voice my concerns, and they kept pushing it off. And finally, when I went and I spoke, I was the only one there. I was literally the only one there, and the only one that spoke, at least. And I voiced my concerns, and I've been doing that since wherever I live. So what happened in Tucson? Okay, so this is history in the making for every human on Earth. So I made a film, Frankenskies. Please check it out, frankenskiesthemovie.com. Documentary about the history of not just weather modification, but the spraying of our skies, okay? Because that's not just geoengineering. It's not just weather modification. It's not just solar radiation management. It's all these things. There's biological testing. There's all these things. It's the spraying of our skies with aerosolized chemicals.
Okay, we were just watching it, and I had no idea about how far back it went. And I think some of the operations you talked about, there's an Operation Popeye, and then there was another couple of them, and that was all news to me. I hadn't heard anything about that until that documentary. So. Yeah,
Popeye is one of the more popular ones. It's from Vietnam, where the weather warfare machine of the U.S. Air Force had at that time been completely perfected. And they said, hey, we can make it flood. We're going to flood the Ho Chi Minh Trail and use weather as a weapon. And then afterwards, all of the countries of the world came together because they saw that weather had been weaponized, and the U.S. was first mover on that. They said, well, we're going to come out with a treaty and ban weather warfare. Otherwise, who's in control, where are the borders and all this stuff. And all these countries came together and officially banned weather as a weapon, So that's history right there. And I mean, it's kind of hard to deny it. I've had so many people that are skeptics on this conspiracy because it's been framed that way through the controlled media. And then they watch 5 minutes of Frankenskies because it starts in the 1920s, the historical, chronological, stock footage from the U.S. Air Force. It starts in the 1920s. So by the time we're at the 40s and 50s, people are pretty much realizing that this has been going on for a while, right? So the spraying of our skies is not just limited to control of the weather or using humans as experiments for different what have you. The most shocking, as far as I'm concerned, the most shocking footage in Frankenskies is a 1970s experiment by the U.S. Air Force where a Midwest city, I believe St. Louis, was sprayed with chemicals, radioactive cadmium, to see how many children would die. And it wasn't just sprayed with jets. They took that same chemical and sprayed it from the rooftops and sprayed it from station wagons on ground level.
U.S. government? That was
U.S. Air Force, yeah, the United States government. A reporter filed Freedom of Information. It's been so many years, and she discloses that. That's as the timeline of the Frankenskies developed and brings us to current day. In the 70s and 80s, it divulges that one. It's really, I mean, it's incredible. So it's not just weather modification or geoengineering or dimming the sun. It's spraying different chemicals to see what happens, right? And now we've got this forest fire issue in Northern California and all over North America. And well, the chemicals that have been sprayed for decades now are patented fire accelerants. So not only can we make it rain on top of forest fires, no problem. We can make clouds and make it rain in 5 minutes time. So not only can we have a solution to these fires, but we're also exacerbating, if not purposefully creating fire hazards and fire conditions with the spraying of fire accelerants, aluminum oxide being one of them, on our forests now for decades, right? So that's something to really acknowledge and be aware of. And then on top of that, when these geoengineered winds are exacerbating forest fires, we could be quelling those fires, not exacerbating them. So either way, the Tucson thing. So there was an experiment to take place called SCOPEX, the Stratospheric Controlled Perturbation Experiment. I forget what the O is. So it's out of this researcher, the primary solar geoengineer. His name is David W. Keith. He's out of Harvard. He's a Harvard professor, okay? And he gets public funding from Bill Gates, not Bill Gates, Melinda Gates Foundation, but Bill Gates is his quote-unquote sugar daddy, the sugar daddy of geoengineering, which geoengineering, even though it sounds like geology or something that we're familiar with, a lot of people don't know exactly what it is. It's the spraying of aerosolized chemicals into the sky to dim the sun. That's what geoengineering is. It's the engineering of the geo physics of the atmosphere, right? So David Keith, okay, he's this primary researcher guy, and he was to come out with this experiment publicly because all of a sudden the media has latched onto and run all these articles saying that we need chemtrails. So let me back up. So I'm making this film about chemtrails, aka geoengineering or whatever you want to call it, but chemtrails is the overarching umbrella word, okay? And that's why that one's been demonized. And then you've got pitches for geoengineering and what have you, but chemtrails includes NASA's Charged Aerosol Release Experiment, CARE, and the CIA's Solar Radiation Management, or SAI, Stratospheric Aerosol Injections.
I think I watched a video about a guy.
There's all these different programs going on simultaneously, and then chemtrails is the umbrella that describes all of them, including the weather modification, or the tropospheric aerosol program from the Department of Energy. Okay, so that's a really important one. The Department of Energy in 2001, they came out with a document right before 9/11 called the Tropospheric Aerosol Program, where they had an entire program to make sure solar energy didn't proliferate. So the dirty energy, coal and oil, they come out with this program, and they even sprayed grid patterns of different chemicals, mixing chemicals to dim the sky over Nashville, Tennessee, hidden in plain sight, this document, Tropospheric Aerosol Program, Department of Energy. They don't talk about contrails, chemtrails, geoengineering, but they explain the entire thing, and they have a budget extrapolated for years, like launching a program to spray chemicals in the sky to dim the sun. So either way, I digress. So David W. Keith was to launch this experiment through this company called not SpaceX, sorry, it'll come to me in a minute. This company out of Tucson, and he was to go up in a balloon and spray these Worldview Enterprises, sorry. So David W. Keith was supposed to go in this balloon publicly and launch this experiment to spray chemicals out of a balloon to see which chemicals work best to dim the sun. And he's to use sulfur, but he thinks the sulfur might fall out and make acid rain. He's to use diamond dust, but he thinks diamonds might be too expensive. He's to use mirrors, but he doesn't know if the mirrors are going to float. He's to use aerosolized aluminum oxide, and he's going to experiment with various nanoparticulate sizes of this aluminum oxide, which he's been secretively organizing the programs to spray us with aluminum oxide for decades now. So he's sidestepping decades of treason by normalizing and officializing this and saying, you're welcome, we're going to save you with this. So he's going to launch this experiment, test different sizes of aerosolized aluminum out of Worldview Enterprises, out of the balloon at first, okay? And these balloons are actually really wicked if you research them. They're tethered, and they can release payloads for months at a time. Wow. So they're tethered together with different balloons, and you can create a grid of them and have them spraying as we're saying, yay, block our sun. We don't need that. We need to prevent the sea level from rising even further, even though it's not rising, right? We're all being tricked through this Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution, just like every other thing. This is just another one of those to convince us we need something that is actually the problem. So, I mean, think about it. If they were actually spraying aluminum in our skies and creating a greenhouse effect and then saying, oh, look, there's a greenhouse effect, we need to spray your skies to save you from something that we just created. And as they spray it, they superheat it with Tesla tech, ionosphere heaters from the ground level. And I mean, you've got superheated atmospheric levels that are all metallicized. And then they blame our carbon emissions, which we exhale and our cars exhale, but we're not even told that the number one greenhouse gas is water vapor. So even if that was water vapor coming out of the back of the jets, making a milky white haze, creating a greenhouse effect, it should be scrutinized. There should be transparency. So either way, but the contrail has actually been a con the whole time. There's high bypass turbofan jet engines that cool the air, and there is no such thing as a condensation trail. Anything that we see that's coming out of the back of jets nowadays, over the past couple of decades at least, it's a chemical. There's this orchestrated ballet going on in the sky to release different chemicals, to mix those chemicals together for different impacts. So I had a conference in Tucson to raise awareness about the upcoming experiment. The experiment was supposed to happen last year, 2018. We created a big fuss. We had a concert, a protest. I went on Coast to Coast right before Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie, which is about 2 million live listeners. People came in from all over the country, a few hundred people. The place was packed, and we created some waves. People heard about it. And I believe that the waves that we made prevented the experiment from actually happening last year, because it didn't happen and it was supposed to. Now there's talk of it happening this year, but this is after a very bitter winter. We just got snow in Las Vegas. I think you guys got snow down in Phoenix.
Crazy, yeah. We just got snow in Flagstaff. I think, I'm not sure about the city Phoenix, but yeah, it's been pretty cold the last few days, cold, which is odd.
This is not normal for me. Strange. We had, I think, 2 summers ago, we're up, in north of Payson area. We had a cabin up there and it snowed. and it was over about a period of 2 days. And then, you know, the next summer was really hot, and this one we're having the same. It's really, really odd. I had a question for you though, because with the geoengineering and the companies that are, you know, trying to put it out there that, hey, you need to worry about rising sea levels and all of this, and we need to control the climate to prevent it. Do you think, or have you found in what your research is, any type of link between the oil companies and geoengineering? And then I have a little bit of a follow-up, because I'm kind of going somewhere with it.
Well, for sure, the oil companies and coal, they're pretty much one and the same, in my opinion. And you've got this document, the Stratospheric Aerosol Program, which I can't stress it enough. It's everything right there hidden in plain sight. It's from 1999, and it's from the Department of Energy, which is oil and coal. And they launch a whole program basically building this solar radiation management program that is now going public. But also an incredible link is what's in this spray. So people want to know the who, what, why, where, when, and how, or they won't listen to anything that's been conspiratorial or outside their frame of thought, because they have these mental constructs built and they have cognitive dissonance, and they don't want to hear it from me. I'm not the guy in the white coat that they paid to ask questions. I'm some guy, you know? So they want to know it all. And I've actually done the research, and I can tell you the who, what, why, where, when, and how to the best of my ability. And the what is being sprayed is a refined version of what is burned at coal burning power plants. So coal burning power plants have these filters, these scrubbers that filter the soot. And when you clean that soot out, you have this disgusting toxic waste that's called coal fly ash. That coal fly ash contains nanoparticulate cadmium, titanium, strontium, aluminum, all these things, barium, all these things that are in the chemtrail sprays. So literally, and I've had so many different interactions with people who know the train routes, who have just followed the money, and it goes, these bladders that are supposed to be disposed of and buried in the ground that have the coal fly ash, they're getting put on a train and they're going straight to Air Force bases. And there they can go through a quick refinement process, if any, who knows? Sometimes there's black lines in the sky and you wonder. But that the EPA has regulated these industries, and they're supposed to be not putting this stuff in the sky through the smokestack. So they just put it in the sky another way, and it's pretty evil. So yeah, there's a complete and total connection. If not, I mean, it's more than a connection, right? It's like causation, illusion.
How does HAARP tie into all this? Because I think I remember back in the day learning something about HAARP and the weather modification. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, so HAARP is HAARP. It's an acronym for the Highly Active Auroral Research Program. And that was the first ionospheric heater. So you've got layers in the atmosphere: troposphere, stratosphere, ionosphere. And if you can steer the jet stream, which is in the ionosphere, you can control weather patterns, okay? And when remember when we used to watch TV and we were watching the weather, and there'd be like H's and L's on the map steering the weather around? That H is a high pressure, which is heat, which is hot air rising. And those L's are low pressure, which is, I had to become a meteorologist, evidently. So L is sinking, you know, and when those two things collide, you get thunderstorms and stuff spinning around, whatever. So if you can create high pressure, you can steer stuff around, essentially, okay? And you can create high pressure by superheating the atmosphere with frequency. It's Tesla technology. And the HAARP station that was first in Alaska, now that technology has been shrunk down and put all over the world, and they're called ionospheric heaters. It's not just the HAARP antenna array. The HAARP antenna array was a football field size, if not larger, field of antennas. And these antennas would find a focal point in the atmosphere, a rather large one. Think of it as like a big ass space in the atmosphere. And they would pick that as a focal point, and they would superheat it by intersecting frequencies, okay? And this was a big antenna array that would do that. And if they could point it and superheat portions of the atmosphere miles and miles away. So this antenna array in Alaska could steer weather patterns or create high pressure bubbles over, for instance, this catastrophic drought that I referenced in California around 2012 through 2016 when I was living there and experiencing weather modification, what have you. And it's also documented in the film Frankenskies. When they first experimented, well, I don't know about first, when they first drastically manipulated the atmospheric river jet stream that comes off the Pacific and feeds the moisture to the entire transcontinental United States, the mouth of this river is in Northern California where I was living. And a high pressure bubble was created off the coast of California that sat in place for years. And if you could just keep making a high pressure bubble artificially, when this atmospheric river jet stream comes off the Pacific and wants to hit California, it would hit this high pressure bubble and get steered around, and it created a few-year drought in California. So yeah, that's HAARP. And now that you've got ionospheric heaters everywhere, you can spray the skies with your metallics, mix those metals together to get them charged up into plasma and what have you. And then you'll see the ripples in the sky. After the spray has settled and the haze has mixed, then the ionospheric heaters are flipped on and you can literally see the ripples. And that's when they're manipulating it to different degrees. I think sometimes it's experimentation I witnessed so much stuff in Sedona, Arizona. Have y'all been up there?
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's gorgeous, but I've also witnessed a lot of weird acrobatics in the sky with spraying and zapping and this and that. And it's not necessarily when they were manipulating weather patterns. I feel like that so when they zap, it's an EMF. So then we can link this to 5G. So what's the connection from 5G to geoengineering? I think the primary one is 5G completely breaks down the blood-brain barrier. EMF fields cause blood-brain barrier leakage. The tests have been done in rats. The information is there if you look. So the biggest obstacle for the powers that be in the geoengineering space when they're experimenting on the public, because ultimately I think they want to control the minds of the public and have everybody under, I don't even know, control. Control your populace through mind control. If you can control the frequency around them and put metallics in their brain, what have you, who knows what the experiments really are. But if you look at it from the perspective of a crazy conspiracy theorist, you start to connect these dots, right? So, and I'm just joking, but ultimately the 5G space, it makes the EMF fields drastically more than we've ever experienced. We've got a cell tower every 500 feet, these small cells that can be as small as a cubic foot of them, okay? And they're right outside your window. Essentially, they're 300 feet from your bedroom window. And these EMF fields that these cell towers are putting off are going to be 100 times more than what cell towers are already putting off. So you've got a cell tower right next to you, but it's putting out 100 times more radiation than the massive one that maybe was like down the street or something and you were worried about, right? Wow. So these EMF fields create blood-brain barrier leakage. So we're gonna not be able to have this protection from our brains like we do now. So now we can be healthy, happy humans and avoid absorbing toxins by taking into consideration our health. So for instance, fluoride. If you can avoid the fluoride toothpaste and hopefully avoid the fluoride in your tap as much as you can, then you don't have the fluoride in your body. And fluoride actually goes past your blood-brain barrier, but aluminum does not. So you're getting aluminum from your sunscreen, aluminum from your deodorant, aluminum from your vaccines, aluminum from the geoengineering, but it's not so easily getting in your brain, right? Like we don't all already have Alzheimer's and dementia, but the fluoride in your body, it clings on to the aluminum, it escorts it past your brain. Actually, those two chemicals mix together and it's not pretty. But if you don't have the fluoride and you mitigate your health consequences, what have you, and learn, you can reduce your exposure to the aluminum in your brain. Also, you can get mineralized. Like a lot of us are mineral deficient, all right? Almost all of us. For instance, for every molecule of sugar that you ingest, it takes 54 molecules of magnesium to process that one molecule of sugar, 54-to-1 ratio. And we don't all get much magnesium. We're not all taking Epsom salt baths or juicing a lot of greens. The central atom in the chlorophyll molecule, which chlorophylls all your greens, is magnesium. So that's one way to get your magnesium. But if we're not up to speed on our magnesium, we're not up to speed on all these other minerals that used to be in our soil but isn't there anymore, right? Now, to grow food, all you really need is three things: NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But before, our ancestors, they had so many different minerals. So now that we're mineral deficient, we're absorbing minerals, toxins from the environment, thinking it's something good, absorbing the strontium, thinking it's calcium, what have you.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Monsanto, which I believe they sold to another company, but their GMOs are genetically engineered to be resistant to those particular chemicals, if I'm remembering.
There is aluminum-resistant genetics, aluminum-resistant seeds, patented by Monsanto. Monsanto's now been bought by Bayer for $66.6 billion. And now we're going to lose that name Monsanto and not realize, really where that is after a generation. But really the most important thing is to understand GMO, which these plants have been genetically altered so that they can withstand being poisoned. So bad that they would actually die otherwise. And then that poison is leached totally through the plant, and we eat it, like the toxic Monsanto's glyphosate, Roundup, which has been proven in the court of law over and over now that it causes cancer, but still it's being sprayed on conventional, so we have to take our health into our own hands. We need to eat organic, learn about the dirty dozen, learn about becoming mineralized, figure out how to become mineralized. You can get mineral pits, shilajit, or plant-based minerals. In the plant-based minerals, water-soluble minerals that I've gotten out of Utah, it even has on there strontium, barium, aluminum, but these are plant-based. All these minerals, gold, platinum, palladium, all these minerals, because we're electric beings, we get up to speed on these minerals. We're not absorbing any of these toxins from the environment. That's one thing to latch onto. Also, chelation, getting these things out of us through learning about chelating. You can just take supplements like activated charcoal, spirulina, diatomaceous earth, food-grade diatomaceous earth, zeolite, chlorella, cilantro.
I wanted to ask you too about something I think you mentioned about copper needles in the atmosphere.
Or maybe I did mention that a long time ago, but Ilana Freeland had mentioned that. I don't really know about that. That's in her book, Chemtrails, HAARP, Full Spectrum.
I wasn't sure exactly what that was meant by that, so that's why I was
Evidently, the magnetosphere needed some help, and Russia blasted all these things into space and all this stuff. But I may have said that years ago, but I'm not there with that anymore. I can't. Nothing that I haven't seen with my own eyes necessarily. Like, I'm not really sure about the needles in space. That's all I'm saying.
Right. So, and I believe, I'm not mistaken, you are working on a clothing company that's going to be kind of defending against EMF waves.
Yes. Yeah, that's a lot. That's something that I'm doing. The name of the clothing line is Sparrow, Spero. And the catchphrase for Sparrow is, wherever there is hope, there's always a silver lining. And Sparrow is Latin for the word hope. Okay, and everything that I'm making is lined with silver. So I'm making cell phone pouches, baby blankets, baby clothes, maternity wear, men's underwear, hats, sweatshirts, t-shirts. Everything is lined with silver, and silver is the best material that deflects EMF radiation. A lot of research and bouncing around the world to figure this out, but evidently in China, almost all the pregnant women wear these maternity aprons to protect their children from the 4G that they already have over there, and the 4G LTE and the cell phones and what have you, because, well, there's like a one child rule that's no longer in effect really, but in China you really basically one chance. And then also the country is communist, so their healthcare takes care of them the whole time, so they don't really want their children to come out a customer to big pharma. They want to take care of their kids and not have autistic children and stuff. So these silver maternity aprons are really big over in Asia, but we haven't heard of them because, well, first of all, we call it EMF. They don't even call it that over there. They call it radiation, because that's what it is. It's radiation. But we've got a fancy word for it, and we love our devices and don't think that it could do anything. But when people get when women have been carrying their phones in their bra and they have literal square-shaped tumors right there, or the person who's been holding their phone to their certain spot and they have a tumor right there and what have you, I mean, the EMFs cause harm. I've got countless studies and what have you. It's called non-ionizing radiation. There's two types of radiation. One of them is so strong that it strips an electron from the ion and it's ionizing. The other radiation is just not that strong. That's all that it is, but it still causes damage. There's so many studies. And
So,
go ahead.
I was going to say, so when you were going to these courts and trying to speak to them about this, what kind of response are you getting from them? Is it helping? Are they realizing, or?
Well, the 5G is hard because the FCC claims that local municipalities cannot take into consideration human health impacts, and there's lots of threats from big telecom to sue and what have you. Not much success, definitely not in Arizona, not much success in California, though people are really excited about these revised ordinances. Now, instead of 500 feet from a playground, we're getting 800 feet from a playground. But we're all getting cooked, like the radiation from 5G, as far as I can see, a couple generations from now, there won't be any children being born. It's like that. It's really detrimental. The radio, so really quick to explain, we have information carried on radio waves. Radio waves can be as big as AM, which is 1,000 feet tall. Then it goes down to like FM. FM waves are 10 feet tall. And these waves are going through us all the time. They don't impact our cells. They don't do anything hardly. If you're right next to a transmitter, you can get radiation from it because people get radio frequency sickness from radar and stuff like that. But it's like, if you're far enough away, it's not that big a deal, right? So as it gets smaller, as the wave gets smaller, it gets more impactful to our health because we're not 100 feet tall or whatever. Here we are, and our cells are super small. And the smallest radio wave is 1 millimeter. That's the smallest radio wave, carrier wave for information that we can have around us. That exists. And that 1 millimeter size is what 5G is, okay? Now, also, these radio waves, they travel at 186,000 miles per second, which is the speed of light. So now that this wave is so small and it's traveling at the same speed of light and it's almost the same size as light, it totally is confused as light by our bodies. So our endocrine system, our pineal gland that dictates our circadian rhythm, our biological clock, our serotonin, melatonin, dopamine precursors, all these things, everything is thrown out of whack. This is why you don't want to sleep with your cell phone, And so we really need to learn about this, learn about blue light. And so the courts, going into City Hall, to answer your question, honestly, I've just now relocated to Ashland, Oregon, because I thought there was some hope in Oregon. And it really comes down to how cool your mayor is. If you can find a mayor or somebody that's your local representative and say, look, we're going to fight this thing, and tell them, and they're on board, then maybe you stand a chance with getting no 5G in your town. But there's going to be waves. They're going to get sued by telecom, and they're going to be it's going to be a big deal for their, where most mayors just want to, not make waves and slip through the cracks and not be some national attention kind of thing. But honestly, it's going to come down to the local level. And if we want protection, we need to speak up. We need to inform our local politicians, tell them that we care, and take, we'll see how things evolve in the next year or two, but we still have time. Deployment of this technology, it requires some extreme infrastructure. The technology is actually pretty primitive. It's a 1 millimeter size wave that can only go about 1,000 feet. Why would you want to carry information on something that can't even go very far? You'd have to have a cell tower everywhere. So this is something we need to consider. And while we're entering into this new era, I think it's the time to mitigate our exposure to EMF before it's increased 100-fold, right? So that's why I'm creating this clothing line for the present and the future. And I've got cell phone pouches already, but ultimately I'd like to have every garment possible for people that do want to mitigate their impacts to these EMFs, because in some situations they can't avoid it. Some people can't opt out of a smart meter and have to learn how to deal with the implications that, with the environment that they're provided, and I'd like to at least be able to provide a cool, affordable alternative to just getting fried, you know?
Yeah.
I want to encourage people to get a blue light filter on their phone or their tablet or their any device that has a screen. You can get blue light filters very easily by searching blue light filter. The thing with blue light that's coming off these new LED lamps and your street lamps and all this, and it's even causing depression and attributed to suicide and all this, it disrupts your circadian rhythm because blue light is right next to UV light on the spectrum. So our bodies are confused. We think it's noon. So you want to make the tone of your devices more orange, and you can get an app for it. It's really easy, and it's just
on mine.
it's amazing. It'll change your life. Just this little bit of information, and spread the word on blue light. It's really simple. The UV, ultraviolet, it's harmful. Blue light is right next to that. It's harmful. That's it. Unless you are on your computer or your device at noon, and you're telling your body it's noon right now. Any other time of the day, you're messing yourself up. So you're putting that's stuff like that. We need to learn. We need to pass on the information. So please, everyone listening, evidently we all need to become activists one way or another. Check me out at actualactivists.com. On Facebook, where I've got 40,000 followers. Please follow me, Matt Landman. On YouTube, please subscribe, Matt Landman. Please check out my film at frankenskiesthemovie.com. And also to check out the crowdfund for the clothing line, Sparrow, at gofundme.com/protectionclothing. Okay, if I can get a little help, it'll be quicker and easier. And the people that do help, they'll get, I'll hook you up later on as it comes through. But right now, slow and steady, I'm still coming out with the clothing line. It's just not going to be as quick as it could be.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again, and I really appreciate it, and hopefully we can do this again sometime. So.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
I have to do it again
Probably
sometime
got lots of
because
questions.
I do. I always, go back and look at the research and pull up, but I'll definitely have a lot of questions for you. So it was great having you on.
I hope to be on soon, and any further questions on any of this or anything you uncover, I'd love to hear about it, because we're all learning all this together, and evidently we all need to become meteorologists, electrical engineers, and doctors.
Activists.
Right?
Yeah, right. So bless them. Thank you. Peace.
All right. Thank you.
Later.